Thank you guys for tuning in. Today we're kicking off a new series for thinkqc3.com where I'm simply just sitting down with amazing people that are doing awesome things inside and outside of supply chain. Today we're kicking it off with Christina Depriest, a very interesting person that I really enjoyed having a conversation with and getting the opportunity to catch up. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. Also, by the way, if there's anyone that comes to mind that you potentially might want to see interviewed inside or outside of supply chain, shoot me a DM, send me their information, and I'll reach out. Thank you guys in advance. Hope you enjoy the conversation and have a great day. Thank you for joining me today. We have Christina Depriest. We're going to be interviewing, just covering some fun topics. I'm going to go into your bio real quick. If there's anything that I missed, don't hesitate to jump in, or if I misinterpret anything. You have a bachelor's degree, international business, with a minor in French. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. So you speak French?
Oui, je parle français un petit peu. Yeah. I studied in France.
Nice.
Actually, I started college to be a veterinarian, but I was minoring in French. And then I moved to France in college, and that's when I changed my major. And so I studied economics and politics when I was living in France. And then when I moved back, that's actually when I changed my major to international business.
Wow, awesome. You learn something new every day. Wow. All right, so MBA, where'd you get your MBA from?
I got my MBA at a small college in my hometown, Friends University, and it's actually the same university that my grandmother attended. So she was pretty proud of that. I didn't walk for my bachelor's, but my grandmother insisted that I walk for my master's because it was the same university she attended.
That is awesome. 20 years of supply chain experience across and in the aerospace and defense industry, specializing in outside of the box supply chain challenges. And we'll kind of talk about some of those a little bit later. Ran your first marathon in 2014, the LA Marathon, and then you qualified for the Boston Marathon with your second marathon in Charlotte. Is that accurate?
Yep.
Did I say that correctly? Okay, perfect. Spent 7 years in the top 2% of marathon runners. Wow, that makes my knees hurt just saying that. You've run over 6 world marathon majors, earned your 6-star medal in Tokyo this year. Congratulations. You've run over 50 marathons in total, 60 plus half marathons, and a few ultra marathons. That is crazy. So ultra marathons, is that considered anything over a certain, what's the mileage that an ultra marathon would be considered?
I think that's kind of up for debate. Some people would say anything past a marathon. For me, I don't really consider it an ultra unless it's at least 50K. So that's 31 miles. I mean, I've overrun marathons and I have fallen short of ultras when I've stopped at 28, 29 miles. I don't really consider it an ultra. So for me, at least, if it's not at least 50K, then you didn't run an ultra marathon.
That is amazing. I'm gonna train for a half marathon this year. I'm gonna try to do it in the September timeframe to give myself some time. Yeah, so thinking about the amount of marathons and half marathons you've run is a huge feat. That's amazing. So you completed your first Ironman in Mexico in 2024. You'll have your 7th world major in Sydney and your 2nd full Ironman in Cali. So you're gonna be doing an Ironman this year?
Yep.
Awesome.
I've been
And
spending
then
so much time on my bike. I feel like I'm so far behind, but it really has to be done in baby steps. I keep reminding myself of that. Like all the training has to be done in baby
yeah,
steps. So.
yeah. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but your training for an Ironman and the marathon, are those similar in a way? I know there's running that's part of the Ironman, but how is that similar training?
Yes and no. And one thing that to me was really unique training for my first full Ironman, at least, is that my running mileage was significantly cut. I'm used to running sort of a base of like 35 miles a week, and that's just a maintenance mileage. And then when I was doing my Ironman training, the first round for Cozumel, my running mileage would get down to like sometimes 20 miles a week. And I felt like, oh, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough because I was running marathons at the same time. And so I had a lot of worry being primarily a runner for so long that I wasn't going to be able to run my marathons, but it worked out just fine. And so I would say that the cycling piece of it is really great cross training when you're training for a marathon anyway. You still get a lot of time in the saddle. That's what they call it, like when you're riding your bike, time in the saddle. And so it works your legs differently. So you still get the cardio benefits it is strange at first to be running marathons when you're only actually running maybe 20 miles a week. It's a strange kind of
Yeah.
feeling to think because you think like I'm not going to be ready for this. And then for me, at least, I was just fine. I ran 2 marathons 3 weeks before my first Ironman. So I ran just fine. So I think that
Wow.
but I've run a lot of marathons. I know what it feels like and I know what it takes to get to the finish line. So that's probably a
Right.
big part of it too.
That is amazing. And your last item I want to cover, you are a guide for the Achilles International organization that promotes inclusivity in the sport of running for people with varying disabilities. That's amazing. Can you kind of talk, how did you get involved in that?
Well, I attend a couple of different run groups here in the Charlotte area, and we had a runner who started running with us. I wasn't guiding him originally. One of the guys that I do some training with was, but then over time, you just sort of get to know them. And then one day, one of the blind runners needed a guide and reached out and said, "Hey, are you going to be at the run group? Would you be willing to guide me?" I was really intimidated at first. I was really worried because for me, like you are literally responsible for somebody's life at that point. There's traffic, there's cars, you have to
Yeah.
develop communication. There's sort of standard practices, but you have to learn those things. Now I've guided 3 different runners at varying lengths of events. Last year in November, I guided one of the runners for a full marathon, and he was able to qualify for Boston as a blind runner. So that was really exciting to help him reach that accomplishment. But for someone who's been in the sport a long time, and I kind of feel like I've accomplished everything I've really put in front of myself to be able to help be a part of an environment that creates opportunities for other people in a sport that I love is something that like I would guide every race. I don't care about running fast anymore. I don't care. I would guide every race. If somebody needed a guide, I would absolutely do it.
That's amazing. That is awesome. All right. So we're going to jump into the questions. When I started this series, I wanted to interview individuals that I found interesting that are in the supply chain industry. So some of these questions that I shoot out there are going to have some supply chain content in them, and so we'll go ahead and jump right in. So my first question: how has running marathons made you a better supply chain professional, or vice versa? Like a supply chain professional made you a better marathon?
I would say, ooh, that's tough to decide which influenced which more. But I ran my first marathon not really far into my career in supply chain. And I would say training for and running marathons has probably influenced me career wise more than my career has influenced running. And I think a key element to that is, as you know, in this field, are unexpected things that happen. You can have a perfect forecast. You can have what you think is a perfect environment. Everything is planned and everything is scheduled. And then something like COVID happens, right? And
Yep.
all of the unexpected happens. And you just have to find a solution and keep things moving. You can't just stop. They don't just pause. And ultimately, running, you can train and be prepared and think that you are 100% ready. And then, like something like Boston 2018 comes along, and you are facing headwinds and sleet and 28 degrees. And ultimately, you have to just keep going forward, right? So I would say that being a runner, particularly long distance running, has probably changed the way that I think in my career because you can have the best preparations that you think. And you can think you're 100% ready, and there are elements outside of your control that you literally just have to find a solution and work through. There is no way out.
Wait a
You just have to keep going.
Yep, that's awesome. I completely agree with you. Yeah, finding a way to adapt to those obstacles that pop up, man. I couldn't have said that better. So when I run, and I by no means have the accolades or can even run even half of the distances that you've run. But when I run, at the tail end of my run, my brain just starts. I start thinking about things, sometimes weird things, just out of the box. Like, hey, what did I eat for a snack yesterday? Or just kind of like organizing my day for the rest of the day. Like, have you ever solved a crisis or like a work crisis when you were running, or what's like your thought process when you run?
I would say a lot of times for me when I'm running, I'm trying to think about nothing. I have music playing. I'm trying to actually turn my brain off because it's constantly going and rotating, and I have 50 things happening at any given time. However, there have been a number of times where I will have a complex problem at work, or I'll have a forecast that I'm trying to develop, and I'll be in the middle of the run, and these things are just processing in the back of my head, and something clicks, and the right calculation or the right factor that needs to be included comes to my brain, and then I have to like hold on to that for the rest of my run, so that when I get back to my computer, whatever, I can like write that down. Now I didn't used to run with my phone, but now I will even like pull my phone out and send a little voice note to myself to remind myself whatever just came to mind, because sometimes when you're not thinking about everything, all the stuff that's going on in the back of your mind is still rotating, and then suddenly something clicks.
Okay. So, if your supply chain career were a marathon, what mile marker would you say that you're at right now?
Whew, I'm gonna say mile 6, and really that's because for me, it takes me 5 miles just to get comfortable, and then mile
Yeah.
6 and mile 7 is really where I kind of start to settle down. Things aren't particularly hard, but I can do 10 miles just cruising. I've got to get through the first five. The first five are the most challenging, just getting a rhythm, getting yourself going. And then once you kind of settle into it, then you can kind of cruise along and just maintain. And then the end gets hard again. So I'm going to say I'm probably around mile 6. I'm past the hardest part in that I have what I would like to think I have a solid reputation for myself as competent and capable, not without obstacles, but competent and capable and steady. And I feel like as long as I can maintain everything, be consistent, then I'm probably at a place where I can kind of settle in, keep moving forward, and then there are always challenges that you don't expect.
Yeah. So, what would you say, and switching to more of a supply chain, I would say question, and I know a lot of people in supply chain automatically say COVID, and if that's your answer, that's fine. But and you don't have to go into a lot of detail. But what would you say would be the most chaotic or disruptive supply chain challenge that you've ever had to navigate through, and how did you navigate through that?
I'm not going to say COVID. Uh, I'm going to say the like 2007 like bubble when everything crashed. We
Yeah.
had lead times that we had like standard lead times that were normally like between 40 and 54 weeks. They went out to 120 weeks. Even on our long-term contracts, we were placing orders 2 years out ahead of time and then just doing everything that we could to pull them in. At the time, I was in person, and my office was adjacent to our manufacturing facility. I was primarily working on 737 at the time, and then I went over to 787. But I would walk down to the 737 fuselage production line and have my little pen, because we weren't allowed to touch the parts because our manufacturing was union. And I would take my little pen and I would walk down and make them open their drawers. And then I would use my little ink pen and separate parts and go tell them, you're going to give these to that guy over there. And then I have more coming for you in a week. Because unlike COVID, where everybody knew that everything was impacted, that was a time where not everything was impacted the same, but
Yeah.
people in the manufacturing world, they were hoarding parts. And so normally when it would be like we would get a bag of 500 of something and they only needed 200 for that month. but they would take the whole bag because they didn't know when the next shipment was going to come because lead times were so terrible. And so for me, I was pretty early in my supply chain career at the time. So being a relatively young, new person in my field, and I took over the desk of someone who was doing it for 20 years. So I took over like a big desk, and I would have to, yeah, walk down there. And here I was, this, young girl walking down on the manufacturing line telling these people, like, no, guys, you have to share. But the most important thing you learn in that instance is when you have to go face your people, face your customer face to face and give them an instruction, it becomes so crucial that you follow through on your promise to them too. Because if you're going to make them give something up, then you better follow through and make sure they get what they need. And so for
Absolutely.
me, I would say that was the most challenging because it takes some level of bravery to do that when you are young and new and you're facing some people who will get really mad at you if you don't follow through. And so, but developing that bravery and that willingness to both go out there, have the conversations face to face, ask them to do what you are requesting, but then making sure you go back to your desk and you're following through on your promises.
Yeah. And not only young and new, but you're taking over responsibility and scope for someone that was seasoned and kind of had that reputation. And so now you're coming in and they're thinking like, is this person going to be able to live up to the previous person? So you're having to kind of, set it, or you're set your own reputation. And yeah, that's challenging in
Yeah.
itself. So,
I will
okay.
never forget the guy's name that I took over for. His name was Tommy. Tommy Tilma. He was excellent. He went down to tooling. I had big shoes to fill, and I was young and I was green. Everybody thought Tommy was like the greatest thing. And so for me to take over his desk after 3 weeks of training, I had 3 weeks of training, and yeah.
Wow.
And he was still there with the company. He
And
was
you
just
did
in a
it.
different place, so people could reach out to Tommy and be like,
Uh,
hey, this girl is failing.
Yeah, that makes it even more difficult when they're still there, and so they're probably getting like up to date feedback on how you're doing. So that's another layer of complexity, and that would have made me nervous. So okay, so tell me well, I'll say that like a lot of times if I'm traveling somewhere, if I'm going something and doing something, I often see or interact with products or things, and I like think being a supply chain person, like I wonder what the supply chain or operations is behind that, or I wonder how they're dealing or navigating certain things. What's a product that you use or a service or something that you've seen in your travels that has made you wonder about the supply chain or the operations behind it?
This is kind of an old thing, but I was actually having this conversation recently, especially this kind of ties back into running, but years and years ago, and I'm not going to name a brand, but there was a brand who got in a lot there was a lot of noise about their supply chain and their production and where their materials were being produced. And I actually when I finished my master's when I was 26, and I really wanted to go straight into my PhD, but I delayed it. And I was actually having this conversation the other day about like my dissertation for my PhD is still in my brain because it would be on international trade policy. And this particular topic for this running brand who got in all this trouble for their supply chain never leaves my mind. And so I think that a lot of people take for granted, especially here in the United States, a lot of people take for granted how supply chain truly works and how profit costs, all of the different inputs, but then how all of those things affect the environment around them. So when you're talking about producing something in a low cost country, people here can't fathom the idea of a miner working in a factory. They just can't. But the reality of it is that there are a lot of countries where children work, and I think that one of the key things should not be like eliminate child labor everywhere in the world, because in the United States, child labor was a very real thing. That's what spring break exists for, because they used to let kids out of school so they could work on the farms at harvest season. And But
Oh, wow.
in order to encourage development of countries, I think that companies need to be cognizant of how their supply chain is impacting the environment around them. And I think better ideas would be things like, if you're going to employ someone who has not yet graduated high school, for instance, there should be elements in place to ensure a path to graduation. So yeah, low cost labor is a very real thing. We all, I say we all, like every country tries to outsource their supply chain, whether it be someplace in Europe or someplace in Asia, places outsource their supply chain. We have a number of things that cannot be produced in the United States due to OSHA requirements. And so they are sourced from other countries where they are allowed to produce them. And so there are a number of factors that a lot of people just don't even consider. And I think that putting protections in place, not to eliminate the what we in the United States might think is like, oh, we can't do that, but putting more secure regulations in place to ensure development and education and opportunities for people, I think is
Right.
a better approach than just saying, oh, we can't do that. They're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Somebody is going to do it anyway. And so it would be
Yep.
better.
Being able to regulate.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
would be better for a company to say, okay, if we're going to employ children, we have to guarantee that they have an opportunity to complete their education. Or, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Just different things like that. Because,
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I have a 16-year-old daughter and she's wanting to work, right? And so she's babysitting for us. And some of the things that she wants to do and do for work, it would be great for her to even get an understanding and kind of sit down and get a look behind the curtain, right? But being able to put those measures in place so where you can provide those opportunities, but the kids aren't being taken advantage of. I think it's absolutely necessary because it helps people understand when they're getting ready to go in the workforce what's out there and really steer them to understanding what they want to
yeah,
do.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people, there's a gap in knowledge, I think, and especially international supply chain and just everyday products and how they're actually produced.
Yeah. Okay. So this next question, thank you for that. That was very insightful. I appreciate that. This next one is a running and supply chain question. It's kind of a two for one. What's a myth about supply chain and a myth about running that you hear from people on the outside that either drives you crazy or something that's very common? Like for me, example, people that don't know about supply chain, they might think, or what I hear a lot is they'll start explaining it to me and they're explaining logistics, right? And I'm like, that's a subset of supply chain, but it's not what supply chain is. So what's a myth about running and supply chain that is something that you hear a lot?
Well, I think you kind of stole my response in terms of logistics.
I'm sorry.
But no, that's okay. I mean, I think you're right from that perspective. A lot of people just think it's like shipping, right?
Yeah.
But also, I think that a lot of people miss the complexities of supply chain. I use the comparison all the time of like, we're not buying socks, right? You can't just swap one out for another. Like, oh, they're out of blue, so we'll just use green.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the, I wouldn't call it a myth, but misunderstandings in supply chain is like, if you can't get one, just get the other one. It's not that big of a deal, right?
Yeah.
Things are not a one for one swap. And in supply chain, there is a uniqueness, particularly when you're working in a technical field. And so I would say, yeah, definitely logistics is probably the most common misunderstanding. People think that, not that logistics is not really important. It is very important. I'm surprised how many people don't know the difference between a fast boat and a slow boat. I'm baffled that people don't know that. But it also, there's a lot of people in supply chain who don't have a clue about logistics, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there is.
So people outside of supply chain who think that it really is logistics, but then there's so many people who functionally work in supply chain and don't have a clue about logistics. And then in terms of running myths, oh, that's tough because I would say that most people think that you're supposed to be good at it in the beginning. Most people think like, oh, I'm slow or I can't run a mile. or they think like you're just supposed to be able to just do it. And they think that long distance runners like myself, who've done a lot of it, we were just able to do it. And that's not true at all. Before I was running half marathons and marathons, I was running 2 to 3 miles a day, maybe 4 days a week. I mean, I ran, you know, but not there's a huge difference between I run to stay in shape and I run marathons. And so running marathons tears you up. Unless you actually want to beat yourself up, you can just run a couple miles a day and stay in shape.
Yeah. There's a myth that you helped me with, and I don't know if you remember, but it was a couple years back. I think I was training for a race that I was going to do. And I thought, I've always run and stayed in shape, but just got out there, put running shoes on and just ran. And I think that the information that you gave me kind of opened up my eyes to there's different types of run that you can do, like your tempo run, your recovery runs, and your long runs. And you gave me like some bullets just on each one, like you put something together real quick. And I took that and that just started my research into, if I'm going to run, you know, 10 miles, I don't just get out there and run till I can't run anymore. And then I try to go further the next day. Like you break it up, you do a tempo run, work on your speed one day, you do your recovery runs and you go through and you do your long runs and you build yourself, creating a plan and you build up to that plan. And that was a myth for me that I think that you really helped me with that. I don't even know if you remember, but I was like, there's nuance to this that I was not expecting. So I appreciate that. I don't know if I ever said thank you, but I appreciate
You
that.
you probably did. I think it was just so long ago. I That's something
Yeah.
that it's one of those things that I over time like you just know, right? And when I think back to
Yeah.
when I was training, like my training for my first marathon versus my training for my second marathon was very different because the first time like you're just trying to get to be able to run that distance and it's such a long slow build. And then once you have achieved, like, okay, I really can run that far, then you want to be able to do it faster. Or then you set a time limit,
Yeah.
and so just training to get to a distance, and that is how I do Ironmans, FYI. I do not train to do them fast. I just train to do them on time. But there's a huge difference. And I was running with a group of guys the other day, and one of them who is exceptionally fast, and he has no desire to run a marathon, none. And I tell him all the time, like, you don't have to run a marathon. You don't have to run a marathon to be a runner. You don't have to run a marathon to be a good runner. You don't even have to run a half marathon. 5K training and marathon training are so extremely different. It's not just going out and just running 3 miles or running 26 miles. It The training is different, the build is different, the whole process is different. So I think that's probably something that non-runners or even new runners probably don't conceptually have awareness of.
Right. Okay. What's the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened while running or in supply chain? Either one.
I'm gonna go with running. I'm gonna go with running. Most embarrassing thing. Okay, well, for me at least, and this probably wouldn't be embarrassing to a lot of people, but actually last year, I was running a 5K, and I think I came off like four. I might have run 4 marathons last spring, and then this 5K is in May. Actually, it was just last weekend this year, but I was having a really good spring. My marathons were going really well. I felt really good. This kind of goes back to like the training being so different. I was running 5K and I'm thinking the year before I ran it pretty fast. I was like, okay, I'm going to beat that time. It's a hot run. I think I ran like a 7:12 pace or something the year before. And I was like, okay, I'm going to beat that time. My running is going really well. And I totally blew up before even 1.5 miles. There's this long hill. It was a hot day. I totally blew up and I started walking in a 5K. I was walking in a 5K. I started walking and I was like,
That's more my
no,
speed.
like just get yourself together because people have this expectation of you, right? When you're running well, and like
Yeah.
people have this expectation of you. I had no injuries. There was no reason for me So like I totally blew up. I thought I was gonna vomit. I started walking, and I think, but it was eye opening for me too. And that it doesn't matter how many times you've done it. It doesn't matter how many times have gone really well. It goes back to anything can happen, right? So I was like,
Yeah.
calm yourself
Yep.
down, get yourself together, get your heart rate down, throw some water on your face, right? And then I took off running and finished the race. But that was probably one of the more like recent things that may not be embarrassing to most people, but sometimes you need your own little ego check. And so
Yeah.
for me, like I don't like to think of myself as somebody who has a big ego, but occasionally having your own little ego check is a good thing, right? Things just not going the way that
Yeah.
you thought. Because here I am thinking
The
like
way you
I
plan.
ran
Yeah.
really great here last year. My spring is going really good. I've placed in most of my races. I've had a really good season so far. And then you just like blow up at a 5K.
But that kind of goes back to your example earlier when we first started, right? And even in supply chain, you might have everything planned out and have everything think it's going to go the way, you think it's supposed to go, and that doesn't happen. So how do you deal with that, right? When that happens, how do you deal with it and what do you learn from it? So that's a great example. So a couple of more questions. Supply chain or marathon, which one is harder in your perspective?
I'd say, like, if you asked me that question probably 10 years ago, I would say marathon. If you ask me that question now, like today, I would say definitely supply chain. And
Yeah, you've done over 50 marathons. I feel like you could do a marathon now in your sleep
yeah,
almost.
and I think that also there is kind of a place where you've hit enough obstacles, you've had enough challenges, you've had good days, bad days. I've vomited in the middle of marathon and kept going. I've had snow, sleet, ice, rain, wind. I've had all the things, right? Not to say that there isn't anything new that couldn't happen in a marathon, but I've been through enough obstacles and pushed through, finished my race. The thing with supply chain is that you can never remove or experience all the possible risks. Also, when you're in a marathon, you ultimately have control over the situation, not the environment. You can't change what's happening around you, but you are the only person you have to answer to. You have to keep yourself going. When you are working in a field like supply chain, the responsibility is not entirely yours. You've got to convince people to do what you're asking them to do. You've got to beg and plead sometimes with vendors to get on board. You've got to call in favors sometimes. You've got to figure out, does this need to go air or truck or boat? How can we get it there faster? Does it weigh too much? How fast can it get there? You know what I mean? Then you've got quality who has to approve it. I just had a whole debacle recently where I had a whole production team. The vendor stopped making something, they revved it. So, and this was like 2024. So the material that we've been buying this for however long, however many years, doesn't exist. The part number doesn't exist.
Man,
And it's the
lessons.
same material. They just rolled it and it's just a rev. So it's the same material name. It just has a dash number at the end. And so we went through the whole thing back when we found out. So like 2024, I think was the first time it was ordered with the new dash number. And so we went through the whole thing, all the certs, all the testing, all the everything sent over. The engineers, the scientists, all the quality people, everybody says, yeah, we can use that. Definitely. We're good to go. Go ahead. So we tell the vendor, hey, yep, go ahead. We can use that. Send us that material. And then I just had a call this week. They issued a whole corrective action on a vendor. And I was like,
Mm.
for what? Like, we have everybody was on these phone calls, right? So
Did all the due diligence.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was, I have the vendor on the phone and I have all the quality people on the phone and the program on the phone. Everybody's there. And so they're like, well, we're trying to figure out what happened. And I'm like, well, you guys said you could use it. So we told them to ship it. And we had proof. Everybody on the email, all the names, they existed on the emails. People on this phone call, they were all there. They actually
Yeah.
ended up backing out. They backed out the corrective action. They backed it out. They reversed it, took it away completely. Because ultimately, we did our part. We got all the right people involved. But that's the key thing with supply chain. You can do all the right things, but you are not in control of it. And so
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can only follow through on the parts that you can control. Whereas when it's running, you are fully responsible for yourself. You just have to get yourself to the finish line. It's not always your target time. It's not always ideal circumstances. So that's why supply chain is more difficult, because you've now got to get all of the other pieces on the same page. And sometimes they come back years
It's not
later.
just you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes they come back years later and
Yep.
say, we're not, how did we get here? And I'm like, no, you guys were part of it. You knew.
Yep. Yeah, it's not just you. That's awesome. Okay. The last question, I appreciate that too. That was a great example. Just making me think, and I want to find out how that goes later. So we'll talk about that offline. The last question I have for you, what's the biggest life lesson that running in supply chain has taught you that no business school could?
You will always get to the finish line.
I like
Yeah, you
that.
will always get to the finish line. I think,
I
and
like
when
that.
we, like, for supply chain in various industries, because I've been in commercial, I've been defense, I've been outside of the aerospace and defense for, brief periods. And I think that's something that I bring from running into my work, and you will always get to the finish line. Sometimes it's going to be ugly. Sometimes you're going to be, walking out to the manufacturing line and splitting parts off with your pen and making people share them so that everybody's production keeps running. Sometimes you're literally, I had to get on a plane and fly somewhere to beg a company to keep making a product that we're the only people that use it. They discontinued it because we don't buy it enough. Gave them a whole presentation about why this material is important, and they decided to start making it again just for us, right? So, but ultimately, no matter how you get there, you will always get to the finish line. And if you keep that in mind, sometimes people have to help you. Sometimes somebody's got to grab your arm and keep you moving forward, but you don't always get there alone. It's not always, you're not always the problem solver, but you will always get to the finish line. But you have to keep going.
I think that is the perfect note to close on as well. I don't know how we would improve and expand on that. So, Christina, thank you super much. Again, I'm starting this series to have conversations with interesting people that are doing amazing things in supply chain and out. Really appreciate you taking the time today to sit down with me and answer some of those questions and just kind of talk and give some of the nuggets of information for people. So really appreciate that. Where can people find you at?
Like online, because I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I'm not giving
Yeah,
my
you're
address. I have a really big dog.
no, your social media, of course. Where can people? Man, you have a lot of inspirational content that you share. So, what we can do is, if you want to share that with me, I'll put that up on the screen so people can find
Oh,
you.
okay, yeah, sure. I mean, it's just my name, Christina Depriest, everywhere. It's just my name because I'm kind of boring. I'm not very creative. I just do stuff and put it on the internet.
I think we've shown today that you're anything. You're not boring at all. Say so. Appreciate it. Any closing thoughts you want to leave?
No, I mean, just thank you for having me. Honestly, I feel like I'm just a really like normal. I think I'm just a really normal person. One thing I guess I will say, and I think I really brought this when I finished my final world major. I got my 6-star medal, and I was kind of on this like mini tour because there's not a whole lot of people who have these medals. So a lot of people have never seen one in person. So I was on this little mini tour amongst like the run groups that I attend occasionally with my little, it's big, it's not little, it's big, my big medal. And I think the most important thing is just to be patient with yourself and keep moving forward, because I've had really great races. I've had really terrible ones. I've had really amazing people in my career, and I've had really challenging things in my career. And so nothing is a straight line, just
Yeah.
keep moving forward. And that is the key element, whether it's in a sport or in your industry. Keep moving forward, and that's really how you're going to get to the finish line.
Love it. Thank you so much, Christina. And I'll share your socials, not your address, but your
Yeah.
shared socials with people. Appreciate you. And yeah, I think that's it. So thank you so much. Have a great
Thank
weekend.
you. You as well. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Absolutely. We'll have to do this again.